So, this is in continuation of the last lectures on the topic generic programming. We today discuss about an advanced feature of it. It is called the bounded arguments in generic programming. So, in the last video you can recall we have pointed out one precaution that a programmer should take. Now, today's video lectures is regarding to that steps actually. So, first I will discuss about as a precautionary measure the concept of bounded types in generic programming and how you can define a class specifying the bounded type arguments. There is an extra feature in this regard also. This is called the wildcard in Java. So, we will discuss about wildcard so far the generic programming is concerned, and then there is again extension of this wildcard concept. It is called the bounded wildcard arguments. We will finally highlight its applications with some examples to understand the concept better. Now, let us come to the discussion about the bounded types in generic class definition. So, the problem that we have faced in the last one example that you can recall. So, there is a problem that if you define a template in generic programming, this is for a class or for a method whatever it may be, but somehow if you do not define its scope properly, then it may invite certain problem. So, problem regarding for a particular objects, if you want to objects of a particular type, if you want to access a methods which is not defined in that class, then it will give a compilation error. As we seen in the last examples here. In this example, so this is a program and we define this program with a generic class and T is the template, and we use this template class definition to access a method for that type. So, T is a type and then here array is basically an object of that type, and we want to access a method double value under an assumption that this double value method is defined for this type T. Now, this double value method is in fact is defined in a class called number. Now, you know, if a method is defined in a class, then any object which is of that class or subclass of that class is basically under this method accessing. This means that this double value method is defined in number class and its subclass like integer, double, float, long, short, all these things, they are the subclass of the number class. That means this method resolution is applicable to number as well as any subclass of the class number. So, this program will not give any error if you call or if you run this program with T type which belongs to either number class or any of its subclass. However, it will give compilation error if we define this T some other class, for example, string class. So, this program will work for numeric values supposed to be, but will not work for other types. Now, that basically is a problem because scope is not properly defined and Java compiler will not be able to resolve this scope at the time of compilation. This is because double value is not defined for any type, that is why, and then it will basically gives a compile time error. Now, so this problem is basically to solve using the concept, it is called the bound of an argument. So, somehow a programmer should specify the bound of an argument. So, this argument, for example, this argument, what should be the bound? Bound means the scope of it, or that validity of this argument belongs to a particular class or its subclass. Somehow that information needs to be mentioned while you write the program, and that is why the concept of bounded class is coming, bounded argument is coming. Now, so far bounding of argument is concerned, there are many bounding procedure. First, let us discuss about upper bound of an argument. That means, while you declare a class, and in that class definition, if you want to mention a type generically, say T, then we can specify its bound, upper bound of that T template. Now, the syntax is pretty simple. This syntax you can follow. In the previous examples, we have discussed that. So, this is the class name and T angular bracket close. But if you want to say that T has its upper bound belongs to a particular class, then we can use this symbol. So, that for example, generic array T extends number. This means that this T is only valid, or scope of this T is only valid to number class or any of its subclass. So, that is why the concept it is there. So, this is the simple syntax that you should follow while you are defining a generic class, and if you want to mention that the generic class definition has its bound or upper bound up to this class or any of its subclass. Okay, let us see one example in this regard, as we can repeat the same example that we have discussed in the last video lectures. Here is the, okay, I have modified. So, generic bound class, the new class definition, but I have modified these things. So, now this implies that this T has its upper bound to number or any of its subclass. Rest of the things are pretty simple. This will work fine. Now, having this kind of declaration, we can go a little bit forward to see what is the next part of the program. So, this is basically the generic class definition. I just want to use it in a main program, alleviating the problem that we faced in the last lectures. So, here is basically the main program, or it is the driver class. We just give the program where I want to use the generic class that I have defined using upper bounded arguments. So, we declare a collection, it is an array of integers, and then we create, this is the object. This object is generic object because it basically takes the integer array. Now, then we can call this method, it absolutely no issue because it works, and then compiler will not report any error because compiler has resolved that this double value method which is there in average is resolved through this number specification, it is there. The same is true for other instances also. We create another collection of double values, and then we create an object of that collection and then call this method. So, it is also does not give any compilation error. However, this will give an error because here we are declaring a string array of strings, and then we want to call this method average. Now, this average method will not be able to resolve its scope because the string class is not under this bounded argument. So, it will basically report an again compilation error that you will not be able to use this because bound of your argument is within the number and in its subclass. So, this will give an error, but this will not give an error, as in the last video lectures you saw that even if this also there, but if without that definition upper bounding an argument it gave error. So, this is the concept that upper bound of argument that is there in Java programming or we can say the Java generic programming. Now, let us see, there is another advancement in this regard. This is again related to the bounding of arguments, and it is called wildcard. You probably know what is exactly wildcard. Now, whenever you have to list in Unix, suppose all the files which has the extension say doc, doc. So, that list you can say ls star dot doc. So, it is basically a it is a wildcard symbol, right. That means star will replace any what is called the name of the file, but extension should be doc. Now, this is the concept of wildcard. Now, in Java generic programming, the same wildcard concept is used to indicate that it will not problem for any particular casting of a particular type. Now, again I want to see what exactly the casting of a type. Now, you know, for the numeric data there is a different types of values that we can have, all are of numeric type. For example, int, then long, it is a long int, then short int, then float, double, like this. Now, if you want to have any calculation of mixing the different type of numeric values, but of different types. So, in an expression if you have some values or operands with say long type with say float type, and if you do not do any casting, then it gives an error, because casting will not match and type mismatch error it will be there. But if you do casting, then this problem can be avoided. So, that is also wildcard is basically related to this casting. Now, let us see one example, so that we can understand how it matters in your program. So, basically here if you want to deal with a collection of a particular type or collections of different types belongs to the same say numeric concept or string or some other like whatever it is there, then sometimes it may require to do the casting the collection to a particular certain class, so that it can work. So, type mismatch error can be avoided. Now, regarding this thing, let us have a very simple example first, and here actually this program will not work for you. I will tell you the remedy for this. This remedy is using generic using wildcard concept. Now, let us see the program. It is a very simple program. Again we have to just check the program. So, here you can see we are defining one generic class, and here also we have mentioned this is basically upper bound argument of this t. Now, all the rest of the things are very simple. Here only the thing that you should note that we declare a temporary variable of type double. The variable name is sum, initialized at 0.0, and then this is the for loop. It basically for a given collection which is stored in marks. Marks is basically collection of say numbers of any type like, and then it will basically calculate the sum of all values which are stored in this array marks, and then it basically calculate the sum of all this and then return sum whatever it is you can say. So, total. So, this method basically calculate the total of all the values which is stored in the array. So, this is pretty simple one concept. Now, let us see using this generic class definition in your main program. The driver class is look like this. Okay, so this is another method. Okay, I should say another method also belongs to this class. This method is basically compare. So, it is basically compare one collection with others, or we can say compare the total returned by one collection with other collection. So, for a given collection, if we call this method to compare other collection which can be passed as an argument, then we will see if the total of the current class is same as the total of the comparable class is same, then it will return true, otherwise it will return false. So, this is the compare. Simply it will compare the sum of two collections, and the method will be called for one class and the argument will be passed for other class for which we want to compare its total. So, this is the concept. Now, let us have the main class. Our main class is look like this. We have to little bit careful about, because we have called this method for different collections with the different varieties. So, this is basically the main program, the main method, and here you see we declare one collection of type integers. So, it is basically array of integers and we store int marks, this one. and we also declare another objects. This is an array of integer objects, and this is basically the collection. Here we just using the student generic class we create the object. So, this is basically S1 means students 1 set of where the set values are integer marks actually. So, this is the concept here, and then it basically gives a call for this S1 integer marks or total method. Total method is defined in the student class. So, for this object we call this method, it works for you. Now, we create another array of integers, this one, and then we create another collection S2 integer marks. So, these are the two sets S1 and S2, all are of same type integer, and then we again find the total, absolutely no issue. Now, here you see you call the compare marks for the current set with the another set. So, two sets are there S1 and S2. So, we call this one, and compare marks compare the two sets sum, and if it is true, that means their totals are same, then it will return true. So, it will print same marks, otherwise it will print different marks. Okay. Now, here this part of the program absolutely there is no problem, because we are calling this and we are calling this, it is working, and you see that this part of the program will work. But however, if we little bit go further and we see some other parts of the program, then it may not work for you. Now, let us see first, there is another part of the program extending the same thing, but not for integer array, some other array of collections. Now, okay, we are just extending this one, it is in the same fashion, but we create another array of numbers, it is a floating point numbers, it is the double marks array, and we create a collection objects S3 double marks of the type student, passing this array to it. So, this S3 double marks is basically a collection of this one, and it will find the total. So, total will be calculated using the method, it is there, you will see that this will work for you. And another is a float marks, another array, it is at float type. We create another collection, and then that for that collection we calculate total. Also, it will not give any error while you are comparing you are compiling the program. However, this part of the program will not work for you. Now, let us see here S2 int marks, compare mark, S3 double marks. This part also S3 double marks, compare S4 float marks. Alternatively, if we could call S1 int marks, compare S4 float mark, it will also not work, whatever it is there. What we can see is that this is the type of collection, basically the integer, and this is the type of collection, basically double values. This is the collection of type double values, whereas this is the collection of float values. Now, what is the problem? We are calling this is a object of particular type and comparing the objects of another type. Now, the two objects are not of same type, and that basically invites a problem called the casting of type problem. So, it will not work for you. So, this is a one limitation, that if we can call a method for a particular type with another type which is there in the compare method, compare marks, basically in the earlier definition it is supposed to have the same type for which we are calling and for which we are sending. So, that is why the problem, the type mismatch. So, this basically gives a compilation error, and this program therefore needs certain remedy. The remedy is in the form of what is called the wildcard. Now, in Java, the wildcard symbol, that means it basically replaces T by a symbol, it is called the interrogative symbol, it is just like this one. So, if we write in place of T with this one, then it basically says that is wildcard. Wildcard indicates that this basically works for whatever be the type belongs to the same category. So, this is basically called the wildcard symbol used as a typecasting. Now, the symbol, that means earlier in declaration, as you can see, we wrote student T T. So, if we use wildcard, then we should write student then this T. So, if we use it, then the typecasting can be enforced. So, this symbol in place of template T is basically the wildcard symbol, it is there. Now, let us see the problem, modified problem with this wildcard, and if we run it, and you will see that it will run for you. So, here is the program. That program again same thing, only the modification that I have to do is basically here it is same, because I want to extend this generic class that it should have its scope within the number class or any subclass. So, this part is fine, absolutely there is no problem, only the modification or remedy correction that is required, it is there in the compare marks, because compare marks facing problem. So, here is the compare marks, and in the compare marks you can see we have defined in a different way. Earlier it is basically student T others. So, basically the thing is that others is a type of student class. Now, here we put the wildcard in place of T. In the previous example it was T here, and then is basically that okay, student has any type, that means for which method, for which object you are calling, it will not matter here, it will work. So, typecasting is automatically enforced. So, with this correction or modification, the program is now ready for you to compile and run it, and here is the main program. The main program is remains same, you can run it and you will see this. So, there is a little modification that we have incorporated to avoid certain limitation which is there. Now, this is the concept of the bounding and argument while we are defining generic class. Also, we have discussed about wildcard of defining in a generic class definition. Now, like the bounding of arguments, there is also necessity of bounding the wildcard arguments. Now, I will discuss about how the wildcard arguments bounding can be done. Now, to discuss this concept, this concept is little bit complex because it has many intricacies are there. So, my submission is that let us have a example. I will try it to give as trivial as possible, but since the thing is itself complex. So, if we do not go little bit complicated example, you will not be able to understand it, but you have to hold your patience and to understand it, follow. If required, you can repeat the videos several times so that you can understand it. Now, let us see how we can proceed it. We have to have certain examples. So, basically we consider a class hierarchy. It is a basically animal class hierarchy. So, this basically is a super class animal. It has field of long, float and one method print. So, long is basically to store its some values. Now, there is a two subclasses of this class super class animal. They are called aquatic. Aquatic has its own field, and this method print is basically is an overwriting method. Another subclass of this class animal is land. It does not have any print method. This print method is binded to it, and this is the only one field, it is there. Now, similarly land has its own two subclasses, namely pet and wild. It has arguments, field is string one name and is the speed. So, these are the simple class hierarchy where the different classes are there. Some classes are inherited from some other classes and everything, and you know. So, this basically the class definition, and for every class by default there is a super class. So, it is a basically galaxy super it is called. This is the object class. You know not to define, but in Java system all class are basically is inherited from this object class. So, our animal class also as per the same convention and rule, it is basically is a child class of this super galaxy class called objects. Okay, so, this is the example that we want to follow it. Now, what is actually our requirement? In our program, we are now going to write a program where we want to define everything generically. So, objective is that we want to maintain a list. The list contains any type of animals there in the list. So, in order to do these things we have to follow the generic class concept. So, that is why. Now, let us see first how all the class which are here in this hierarchy can be defined one by one. That means, we want to define first animal class, aquatic class, land class, pet class, wild class with generic concept or whatever it is there. Now, let us see how we can define it. There are few small part of the program regarding definition of each class in our things, it is there. Okay, so, here is basically okay, fine, and here I want to say one thing. There are two bounds or three bounds rather that can be extended so far the wildcard is concerned. The first is called upper bound of wildcard. It is the same as in lieu of T extends superclass A, if we write this extends A, then it is basically bounded wildcard, upper bounded wildcard argument. Similarly, for the lower bounded wildcard argument also can be defined. So, here is the lower bounded wildcard argument syntax as you see. So, this basically this is the in lieu of extends, right, keyword you just use super and this is the name of the class. So, what is the concept? If for a particular method defined in any class, if you use upper bound, this means that that method has its scope belong to this or any of its superclass, subclass. So, if we define a method here with upper bound argument, then that method has its scope belong to this class as well as any of its subclass. On the other hand, if it is a lower bound and defined in this method, it has extend in this class and any of its superclass. So, this one. So, this basically is the lower bound and this basically is the upper bound argument. So, for a method defined in this class with these two bounds has the scope either any of its class or superclass or any of its class and its subclass. So, this basically is the concept of two bounds, and there is unbound. Unbound I will discuss. Unbound is basically there is no bound actually. So, that is why it is called the unbound, and for this unbound we do not have to mention anything. So, here only that you mention this one is basically unbound. What exactly it implies that? So, this if this method is declared with unbounded arguments, then it is basically it has scope to any methods defined in object class, and the code methods in the generic class do not depend on any type parameter. So, that is why the concept. So, it is basically same as the wildcard concept that we have discussed in the previous example. It is same, only the thing is that it is related to object class only. Now, okay, so with this understanding, let us first discuss the different classes and their methods in each. What we will do is that we will try to make a complete shape of all this class. In addition to, we will define a method in each class, a specific method, and this method will basically print all the values those are there in that class or those are basically having in the by inheritance. For example, for this method by inheritance, this is the field value, these values and these values are also accessible to any method if we define here, for example, print method or any other method if we want to define here. Now, so let us see how we can define all these methods very quickly. Here is the first examples of defining the different methods in each class. Now, this is the example of defining class animal, and these are the simple method constructor, and this is the print method, is a very simple method that we have defined here. So, this basically is the declaration of the class animal here. All the methods are very simple to understand. So, I do not want to discuss this is in details. Now, likewise there is another method. So, this basically aquatic method is here. aquatic method is basically extends animal by inheritance, and this is the print method that we declare. So, it is very simple, all these class declaration is simple. Likewise, we will declare land method, the land extends animal, very simple, it has basically one simple methods it is there, that is the constructor, there is no other methods it is there. Now, likewise pet and while method is defined. So, all methods are defined. So, that means all classes are defined. Now, our objective is to make a program generically where the any elements can be stored as a collection. We can create a collection of all pet animals, can create a collection of all wild animals, land animals or aquatic animals or animals of any type, aquatic, land, pet and everything. That means generically we can define so that we can maintain a collection of any type. Now, so this is the one program that we are going to declare using our generic programming concept. Now, this basically class that we are going to declare is called animal world class, and generically with upper bound argument that it has, this class is basically has the scope to this class as well as any subclass of this one, and these are the basically simple concept of declaration of the generic class. Okay, so this is there, and then we want to declare few methods of it. Let us see how we can declare the different methods of it. Now, so this is an example, this is basically the bounded wildcard program. Here unbound wildcard we want to use, and here you can note it. So, vitality is the one method we are going to declare here, which is belong to this class, and this class takes this type, the animal world of any type of animals basically, and it will basically print, that means for each type of animals it will basically call the print method. So, vitality is the one method which we have declared in this class, so that it can work as an argument of this animal world. Animal world can be any animals which is there in this list. Okay, so this is the one example. Now, let us like vitality, we just declare few more method like show C animal world super aquatic. So, this basically is an example where as the super means it basically applicable to this method as well as its super class. So, that is the super thing is there. So, it is a lower bound argument that we have declared. Now, similarly, the other methods belongs to land. So, it is basically the method is called show land, the same as, and it is extend land means it is basically upper bound argument land, and this method can call has the scope of this one. Likewise, we can declare other methods, namely for pet and wild. So, namely show pet and show wild, the methods are there. So, you can go through the code of this method, you can understand these methods are doing nothing, only printing whatever the values are applicable belong to those classes by inheritance as well as on its own definition. So, this is the only thing it is there. So, this is the show. Now, here this is the same method for show pets and show wild. Now, here is the main program, this program needs to be checked very carefully, and here actually this is the main program, the driver class. So, bounded wildcard argument demonstration program. Now, here we create a list of animals, the animals is the unknown, the one unknown animals. So, it basically field animals has the lifespan on weight. So, 40 is the lifespan, weight is 720, and we can create an array of animals. So, only one elements in this array u. So, u is an array of unknown animals, and we can create a collection u list using generic class, and u is the current list in this one. Now, similarly, we create another arrays, what is called the collection of all whales is a shark, create them in a array of all the aquatic animals, and then create another q list, just like u list for unknowns, it is a q list for aquatic. Now, likewise we can create sum the list of animals belongs to each class, and this is the same extension. The L list is basically animal of land animals, and this basically P list is the animal of pet animals, and likewise this is the list of wild animals. So, W list we can say. So, these are the different wild animals is created and list is created. So, what we have done so far in this generic program, we created a number of collections. This is the list of all animals belongs to the different categories like aquatic, land, pet, wild as well as animal. Now, let us see if we call the different methods which we have defined with the different wildcard arguments. Now, here you see the vitality method we have declared, which we declared with the unlimited wildcard arguments there. This means that it is applicable to any method whatever it is there. So, all the calls are applicable to this vitality method. However, if we call the methods which is declared in each class, it may work depending on the arguments or its bounding. Now, here is the one example that you can see. So, now let us see if we apply U list, because it is defined there. So, it will work for you. So, this is correct. Q list also, because it is defined here, it is also this is basically lower bound argument. So, it belongs to this class and this one, but it will not work for this kind of list because it is not valid, because that bounding is not limited to that. Now, similarly, for other method like show land, you can check that for show land has the upper bound wildcard arguments and which is defined in this method. This means that this method will work for this list as well as all these lists. So, it works for this list, however, it will not work for other two lists, the U list and Q list, because bound is not permissible. Now, finally, other two show pet and show wildcard, we have defined it the lower bound. So, it will work for this and this only, for others it will not work. Now, here is the example, as you can see, the show pet is work for the pet list, and then show wild is for wild list. Now, here we can discuss about the bounding of different arguments or wildcard arguments, that means upper bound, lower bound, and the unbound things are there. Now, what is exactly the utility of all those bounding is that makes the object or the collection or generic programming to shape to the type. That is why this problem is called type safety. So, all these wildcard bounding arguments or bounded wildcard arguments to ensure type safety, and type safety is a very important issue. This means that a method, if you want to use in a generic programming, you have to have a very clear what is called the indication that this method has the scope, belongs to this or that, so that it can not be allowed to access this method for any illegitimate class. So, that is why this concept it is there, and with this discussion I just want to conclude this right. There are some hints and tips you can go through it and then have the clear understanding of it, and more about the concept that we have discussed in the topic generic programming. You can get details material that is there in this. All programs that have been used in this videos, lectures, you can find it there, and also a good documentation about each type of concept. It is also discussed in details, so that you can go through and then study of your own. And if you want to have more discussion about all these things, then definitely this is the one or highly referred materials. It is from the oracle.com, you can go through it. Okay, so this is the idea about generic programming, and I would advise you to study little, because this concept is bit different and advanced. So, a single one round reading may not be sufficient. I would advise you to go through several round of reading, and all the programs that has been given there, you have to just check it, try to learn and then run the program. Okay, thank you very much.